Hello again, our friends.
Why, welcome back.
So, please do subscribe both channels. It's been, seems like for ages since we put anything up on Evolutionary. That's because we've been we got like so much in store for you guys over on EEARTS. As we see here, talking about the galactic superwave incoming. Well, yeah, big changes ahead. 3 days of darkness, and then we were reliving Atlantis. Oh boy, fun.
Just a whole lot of stuff that, here it is for the taking. And if you're going down rabbit holes, this is some fun stuff. So,
as I surprise her and just pop this, what do you think we're looking at, guys? And this would be a great topic, but we'll touch on this later. So we were just looking at where we used to live, and then Cindy was like, "Well, where's Area 51?" And I was like, "Well, it's probably right over here. Here you go." So this is part of Nellis, part of that big complex. You can see lots of stuff happening out in the desert. Let's see, are there any little grays over there waving upwards? Oh, what's that over there? Yeah.
it looks like a floating box or something that they colored out.
Yeah, it is kind of odd. But anyway, yes, we are looking at the Nevada desert. And so when you look at this area, obviously, you could look at it and say it's just nothing. It's a lot of nothing. There's a lot of nothing and a lot of things that do happen out in the desert. What stays in Vegas, we keep quiet about.
What stays in Vegas kind of stays in Vegas.
Yeah, exactly. And so this is where we were living. We had bought a little piece of land over here. As you can see, this is the California and Nevada border, Amargosa Valley. We were basically down here close to these green patches. And this is where we saw a lot of ships, a lot of strange things absolutely happen. When you go out farther, you could see, now we could start to see Long Beach, LA, and the Pacific. One thing we've shared in the past, and that's our Amargosa Valley, but we were living like down in here, is that we found coral, and we found clamshells, and we found, all sorts of things that would make you think that the ocean was right here. And we would go shopping in Pahrump, and, I would get these visions, and this is Pahrump over here. I would get these visions on this road, and actually right when we turn here, I'd always feel like I'm seeing water. There's water everywhere. And I don't think it was too long ago. I really think, I think it was within maybe 500 years that there was water all filling up these areas. And how could that be when the ocean is so far away?
How could that be? What kind of things could have happened to make water flood and inundate? And it wasn't just the things like the coral or the sponge that we found. It's the sand. And Mike has a really good understanding with the smell of the ocean and the sand. And he said it really smelled beachy out there with like there was water there at one point for sure.
Absolutely. Well, most of my life was spent within a couple blocks of the water. So, I grew up in Connecticut, right on Long Island Sound. So I was very used to, hearing the seagulls, even, getting the waves in the background. And then I also lived on Hilton Head Island for a year and a half. That was beautiful. Absolutely loved it. Hilton Head's a little paradise. And, when we look to this, we see California as an island. And initially, what I always thought was, maybe they came and approached it from the south. And what they put down there was just Baja, California. And they didn't realize that it wasn't an island. Well, maybe I didn't realize that it was an island at some point in time.
Well, there we have it. It was an island, and there's a lot of very interesting energies when you just go and you feel out in the area that was separated. I mean, that land, there's something different about that land. There's something mysterious about that land. It's very curious when I kind of go there remote view and stand there and feel all the kinds of different energies coming from different directions. There's a lot of things have been done, a lot of rituals, a lot of healings. This very interesting land.
Yeah, we've shared a lot. Like, again, if you look, you could see that there's areas that are very shallow. When we see this, that's a very shallow area. When we look over to the Gulf of Mexico, for instance, when we are in full glaciation, this is all above the surface. So, both Carolinas, Georgia extends farther out. Florida's, 2 or 3 times the size that it is when we're in full glaciation. And, again, the Gulf of Mexico is much, much smaller. But the changes that perhaps occur are much more intense, and perhaps they occur a lot quicker than we think. This is a good little bit of research that somebody had done here. California as an island, a map, not a myth. And this is somebody that's looking at things from a creationist, biblical point of view. But again, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because perspectives do change over time and realizations happen. And yet here you also have a lot of good research that this person has done, and questioning things, questioning how, it's not just one map that shows California as an island. And this person was actually using Jupiter's 4 main moons that you could see with a telescope as a clock, because they are a very stable clock, or an instrument of marking time. And there was so many different tangents that this one little article, well, I shouldn't call it little, sent me off on, that we ended up splitting again what was going to be one video into several videos just to go into it a little bit deeper. So he's talking about the different mountain ranges, and again, how our time frames are not right, which they're not right. But he was just basically saying that the Wasatch Mountains and the Rocky Mountains have been around a long time, but not the Sierra Nevadas. And then he also gets into a lot of the maps and looking at what has gone on throughout time. Let me show you some of these maps. So here you see one, again, showing California as an island. And there are some fascinating legends that we're going to get into, including the legend of the Queen of California, which will be upcoming shortly. It led down a completely different rabbit hole, again, than we might have expected. So here you see this map. I believe this one was from 1692. There's all different dates on these maps. There is a consistency. This is the thing that really hits you, is there is a consistency in showing California as an island. And if we were going to just say, well, maybe it's just that they didn't understand Baja California is not an island, and it leads to an attached area with the North American continent. But maybe that wasn't the case at that timeline. We've been talking about, catastrophes, Tartaria, mud floods. What if this was actually fairly accurate? That would be mind-blowing. So we see Florida, we see them mentioned in Canada here to the north, Nuevo Mexico, New Mexico area, again, the territory. They're showing Mexico all the way on down to Panama, and we see South America down here. Cuba's depicted, many of the islands in the Bahamas, Jamaica there. And you see that, this looks like everything is kind of, well, what do you make of that? I mean, an inland sea, when we look at that and we go to Google Earth, this would be underwater, would it not?
Well, it looks like it to me. I mean, that wouldn't even that wouldn't even be there.
No, and again, this is not an isolated case, because I want to just take time showing you guys these different maps. We have the Gulf of Mexico, and when you look at it, though, the mountains definitely look different. They're showing a mountain range right down through this area where we really don't have a mountain range now there. I mean, the Ozarks are not really a mountain. They're more hills. They were at some point in time mountains. And, they're definitely not really, they're not the Rockies. So when you look at this, it looks really in some ways like a different continent but you got some basic things that look pretty consistent. So, the question is, was there a massive catastrophe? Did somehow the island of California, which if we look at this and we're trying to put this looks here like, where are we? Yeah, we're probably in line with New York or, something like that, Connecticut. So, it's arguably you could say, well, people really didn't have a clue back in those days. They were just obviously, they don't have a satellite up in space. They can't see what it actually looks like. And then, of course, what people say, there is no space. The Earth is flat. Well, we're not talking about flat Earth here. So, save it for a flat Earth topic video. Here's another one. And this one looks very, very similar. This is 1688. 1692 was the last. This is 1688. And we see, very, very similar representation. And, I got to look at these mountains. So when we look at it, they're lined up just a little bit to the west and north of like Brownsville. If you go up straight from Brownsville, right, it looks like they're saying there's mountains in Kansas. It looks like they're saying there's mountains in Nebraska. Yeah, there are some up in the Dakotas, but again, not over in this area. So have we seen rapid changes in this planet that defy modern science? Well, again, what's modern science really giving us? What do they want us to think? What do they want us to think is the question. So was there some sort of massive catastrophe? Did the plate smash into the rest of the North American plate and create the Sierra Nevada? Did it help to create the Rockies? Is that why the Rockies, did it expand the Rockies? Is that why the Rockies are, the way they are? As you see, this one's from 1720. Here's another one, the new and correct map of America, showing the same thing again. And again, it looks like, perhaps this right here is the most northern part of the state of Washington. But then again, where we have Oregon and certainly California, it's an island, and it doesn't look like it's been completed. And you gotta just wonder. Of course, you look at Florida, and they did think Florida was much smaller, apparently, than it is. But then Florida is in so many ways just a sandbar. You got to wonder what type of changes can occur there. Here's another one. This one, I believe, is from 1656. Another one again. There's a consistency here, is there not? This one, it makes it even look a little bit bigger proportionately, or they're here. I guess they're saying they don't know what this looks like up here. They're just kind of guessing that the land trails off. Fascinating to see. There are so many of these. I had no idea there were so many of these. I knew there existed these maps, but I didn't know they were as numerous as they are. Consistently saying that the entirety of California, certainly with Oregon and perhaps part of Washington, was an island.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's just a lot of information here, and you got to wonder. I mean, how do they get these visions? How do they step back? If it was so long ago and there is no aircraft, how do they get these maps? Where do they come from? How are they formulated? There's a lot of questions there, but it was a long time ago, but it wasn't a long time ago. And since it wasn't really that long ago, there's some pretty big changes for us to consider in a short amount of time for them to say these catastrophes only happen so often.
Well, again, think in terms of Tartaria and the technology that's out there. Yeah, we have more videos coming up that are going to show you more examples of the technology that had to be in play. And it's not what we were told. So part of the questions are, the people making the maps, did they ever get to see maybe a view from above? Was that view radically different? Was it a quick, brief glimpse, perhaps? Were some people looking at maybe maps that people that were far more advanced had, and then trying to draw from memory what they had seen? You see the unknown world down in Antarctica here, the Pacific Sea, the Bahamas, Bermuda, Hispaniola, and again, a major island of California. That one's 1646. This one's 1626. The Bay of Mexico, again, we see all the usual, and we see an island of California. And this one's 1705, I believe. And again, California as an island. California as an island, 1730. So it appears that there was like 100-year period where they really truly thought California was an island. Or California was an island. Here's another one. Consistent. There is a consistency there. There is most definitely a consistency. And of course we have, the Piri-Reis map, which shows Antarctica without ice cover. How did they know what the coastline looked like when there was no ice? How did they know? And here's another one. Now this one, maybe it looks slightly smaller, but again, it's really consistent. Are they just copying the same guys, updating the year? Perhaps. But then again, there are other legends that we could get into as well, which speak of California as an island. And there's yet another one. All of them showing basically the same thing. And this is a world map. And you see it's kind of incomplete down like around Australia. And there's land here, as you see New Zealand down here, that, perhaps this was just an assortment of islands that didn't understand were islands, or maybe there was more land above the surface there than there is now. I gotta wonder what that is over there too. So, all these maps. Now, this is somebody giving you perhaps an interpretation of what it's going to be like after the Earth changes. And I've wondered before, too, if sometimes people, when they're getting their visions of after the Earth changes, are actually looking back into the past and seeing what happened in the past.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I get that very strongly with Edgar Casey, because when you reach out for information, since the light of information is instant, there's really no way to see the time. I mean, the information is there all at once, and that's why there really is truly no time. We just use time in this construct for ourselves to have this experience. But when did that thing happen? Was it, in the future, our future? Was it in our past? You can see both sides of it when you reach out and look at these things, or look for these things.
And we see the San Andreas Fault when the big one hits, and it might be not too far away. As many people believe that it's going to be a sequence of events where Cascadia goes first, San Andreas right after that, and then those two could trigger the New Madrid. And of course, we have the X marks the spot. 2 eclipses centered over the New Madrid. The second eclipse is April of 2024. So that's not far off. That means this could happen at any time. When we look at the San Andreas Fault, it gets me thinking about the volatility. It's a very volatile fault. And of course, Cascadia is too. And of course, we had the Great Cascadian Quake of 1700. And that's sending all sorts of lights off in my head. Now, what if that Great Cascadian Quake of 1700 had something to do with California no longer being an island? So yeah, we might have to go down that rabbit hole more too. But when you think about it, maybe it's because this is a new juncture. When we look at the Ring of Fire, we see a lot more volcanism. We see a lot more earthquakes in the Ring of Fire area. Well, when you look at the amount of earthquakes that we have in the United States, the vast majority are really usually in California. Well, maybe it's because this event is not in our distant past at all. It's in the recent past.
There's just too many things that we have that we can line up that show us something different than what we've really truly been taught, and it, after a while, it does get kind of frustrating, but it also gets fascinating because you want to dig into these things. You want to just really dig in, and you're hungry for truth. That's what people are so hungry for. They want to know the truth. And it's definitely within sight of each and every one of us. That truth lies within us. But as long as we're looking externally out at everything that they've taught us to believe to be true, we're not going to go inside and find it for ourselves. But I can definitely feel there's something here more true than than what they've been telling us.
It looks relatively quiet right now, but again, look out over the majority of the U.S. We see 1 quake, 2 quake, 3 quakes, 4, 5. Pretty quiet. Now we come into the Pacific coast. And let's not bring Hawaii in. Let's go a little bit farther. Let's go out of here. So you got a couple quakes up here. This is 129 of 226 earthquakes on the planet at this point in time. 226 quakes on the planet. And actually, as I'm saying that, that's really quiet. So that makes me a little bit cautious because that's a little too quiet, honestly. So there might be something big building as we speak. But when you look at it, you have basically more than half of the earthquakes on the entire planet, even including other areas that are really active, like Indonesia, the Philippines, etc. look at where they all are. They're right here. They're right here. Is this because this is one of the biggest new cataclysmic impacts that we've had on the planet? What if the Sierra Nevada simply came into existence 300 years ago or so, when there was that collision between the island of California and the rest of the part of the United States and North American continent there? Again, we have this fault right here. Now, some scientists believe we're going to have basically a slippage, and you might have this whole side heading up north. I've seen before, and we've touched on this before, where there's some scientists that believe when the big one comes, there'll actually be a separation. It'll be, sheared, and you might end up with Los Angeles farther north than San Francisco. And, you look at this fault, which goes right on through and continues on down, as you can see where the plate is. When we look at Cascadia, this is a little bit more complicated area here. Is this, again, something that just recently occurred? Perhaps as little as 250, 300, 400 years ago? It is certainly curious. Certainly curious. And some, again, believe that over here, the Gulf, Baja, Gulf of California, will go all the way back up and perhaps, again, inundate the Amargosa Valley, Pahrump, all these areas on up and head towards Reno. It's pretty fascinating. I wasn't thinking about doing this topic, but I think we should talk about this.
Well, there's definitely plenty of stuff we can add on to it, and just kind of keep going and adding to and building the picture, because the picture is inside of each one of us, and it's about us putting things together to find the truth. It's like we can all read energies, but in a slightly different way. So if we all take the time to reach our eyesight out a little bit, we can bring in more truth.
So this is from the USGS, 1700 Cascadian earthquake. This was one of the largest in the history of North America. It was found by combining First Nations and active Native American oral histories with tree ring data and other geological evidence in North America, and an orphan tsunami.
Is that word again?
There's that orphan word again in Japan. Orphan trains. Again, the location has been assigned to the approximate center of the Cascadian subduction zone based on the conclusion that an event of this size would likely have ruptured nearly all of this 1,100 kilometer zone. So when this earthquake occurred, the Cascadia region of North America, present-day Vancouver Island, British Columbia, Western Washington, Oregon, Northern California, was pretty much unknown to Europeans, but it was by no means uninhabited. Many groups have oral histories of violent shaking, building damage, sea waves with major flooding, and people killed. Again, they're saying this is a 9.0. That's gigantic. That is gigantic. And wow, from oral history of the Huayat First Nation, people were just going to sleep in the longhouses at Antarctica on Pachena Bay, present-day Vancouver Island. When the earthquake hit, it shook for more than half a minute, and many of the longhouses sank into sand. The tsunami that followed had an estimated wave height of more than 50 feet and flooded the island and other coastal villages. Only one out of more than 600 people in Antarctica survived, and in all, 7 villages of this particular tribe was destroyed. This was huge, and you got to wonder, was this perhaps the event that was actually, the bringing about of the island of California becoming part of the mainland? And will that last? When will that stop? So in Japan, people in towns along the Pacific coast of Japan wrote about destructive waves on the 8th and 9th days of the 12th month of Genroku 12, which is the equivalent to January 27th and 28th, 1700, in the calendar used today in much of the world. And calendar changes are a fascinating subject too. Because no one in Japan felt an earthquake before the waves struck the ocean, many writers were reluctant to call the waves a tsunami. An observer at Kuwagasaki called it a tsunami, and the headman at Miho wondered if it was a tsunami, while others referred to the event as high tide or high waves. Based on damage report, the maximum wave heights in Japan were estimated to range between 2 and 5 meters. So, anywhere from 6 to maybe 15, 16 feet. So you had 13 houses destroyed in this one town. Another 20 were destroyed in a subsequent fire. This is just fascinating to think of. This is from the government of Canada about the magnitude 9 Cascadian megathrust earthquake of 1700. Fascinating stuff. And when we combine it with, all these ancient maps, and then we think to the future about what people have seen the map of North America looking like, with California just being a series of islands, but we're told perhaps Atlantis and Lemuria, Mu will rise again, or new lands. It's given to us in multiple prophecies that this would be the case, and you see in this one's from Gordon Michael Scallion. Cindy has not seen anything of this in her visions of what's to come, quite this dramatic. You see America in the New Millennium. This was a map by Dr. Chet B. Snow. And again, you have basically an island of California down there where Baja was, up to about San Diego. And then we see most of it's all gone, and we see much of Nevada gone, as well as part of Utah and some of Arizona. And of course, this is really taking a lot of the middle of the country out as well. And again, you got the New Atlantis. Now, this one was curious because this one called for a Chinese and Russian occupation in years 2022 to 2024. Hello. But 2016, 2017, it showed the Mississippi, being much bigger than it is. In fact, the Mississippi is at this point much more shallow than typical. But it is curious with that China and Russia occupation. If I remember right, this was a prophecy, it was a vision given to this lady back in 2013. So again, timelines change, things change. We can change things as you look here. Again, this is another take on, what Edgar Casey had spoken of, but maybe a little bit overly dramatic, as you see much of Louisiana gone. And, at this point in time, it doesn't look like that's going to be a reality, but we never know. And here is actual Edgar Casey map where he wrote in his own handwriting different things that were going to happen. As you see, he wrote down that the central area rises slightly. And so the area he wrote that over was Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas. And he had this area over here going downward, basically, and west of the fault stays still. So that's going to end up making California an island again, basically, right? So it's fascinating to look at. And then the Navy map, I heard Ben Davidson quoting it and saying that he felt that this was one of the more likely scenarios. This over here, where it says the government's 100-mile border zone, this is basically the fact that 2/3 of the people in this country live basically along the coastlines, along the borders. 2/3, the vast majority of the population. So if we have 333 million people right now, which is about what they say, you could say 111 million live inside the middle of this, and 222 live alongside the outer edges. Of course, there's not that many up through this area here. there's not a ton of people besides El Paso's a big city, but there's not a ton of people right on the border here. And again, yeah, there are a ton of big cities all along the coastlines. And that could be an issue when these things really do happen, because, again, the guides have said it's not a good idea to be along the coast. And I do think this was either Ben doing this, Ben Davidson, Suspicious Observers, or somebody quoting Ben. And because this is like his language, he was talking about sloshback tsunamis when the pole flip comes. But again, he is saying that he's thinking somewhere in the 2030s, 2040s. What was that other guy's name? I'm trying to think of that guy's name. Man, I can't remember it. But he got the same year that we got, which was more like 2046-ish. And he did it by biblical interpretation mostly, but also looking at the science to a degree. So, again, where is the best place to survive, these cataclysms? Listen to your inner voice, because we all have different purposes here. That's part of it too. Some of us come in not to be, away from everything, but some of us, decide before we're coming in, we're going to be right in the middle of it, and we're going to see who we could help to, survive and build back.
Mm-hmm. And so many of you who are listening, you're extremely bright lighthouses, and you are supposed to be where you're at. If things look like you are staying, then build that light around you, at least for the time being, while you're there.
Absolutely. And don't forget in your preparations to take time out to play, because we'll see that nature's always playing, exploring, having fun. When do you remember seeing birds having fun? Have you had time to just go there, sit and watch, the frolicking and the playing of some birds, for instance? He's having a blast. It's just pure fun. We all love to play in the snow when the snow first comes.
And when you're just surrounded by Mother Nature, when do you see birds worry about when they're going to get their next meal? They're surrounded by what they know will sustain them, and that's how we need to be. Yeah,
and that whole where you're going to get your next meal, that's the subject for another video.
Good.
Why was there no bathrooms in Tartaria? Well, we'll leave you guys with that thought.
Yes, indeed.
As always, thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. Much love, God bless, and namaste.
Namaste.